Raymond, you talked recently at South Bay Ions about your near-death experience. Could you talk to my audience about it now?
I'd love to. I'd love to. First of all, I kind of think the term near-death experience is probably not that accurate. I prefer after-death experience because there was nothing near about it. I mean, I was gone, and came back. So and this happened when I was 9 years old, 1966, and back then, this was a taboo subject. It was not part of our popular culture, and I learned very early on not to talk about it because people will look at you sideways. But my entire adult life, I've had this yearning that somehow, somewhere, somebody could benefit from my experience, and yet I found out that I couldn't talk about it. And only now, only recently, that's been changing, and so I consider it a real privilege to be able to travel. I travel all over the country, actually all over the world, and talk about it, and just tell people what happened. And I think of myself more as a reporter. I'm no guru. I'm not. I don't have any special knowledge. I'm just a regular dude that, like you, I go to Tupperware parties and all that, but something clearly out of the norm happened to me, and it was absolutely profound. And I think about it now. I was 9 years old, and I think about 9 years old. I can barely remember anything about being 9 years old. I remember what I got for Christmas that year. I got a Johnny Eagle toy rifle, and I remember girls were starting to look more interesting.
At 9 years old?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fourth grade, sure. Starting to look more interesting, and but I don't remember a lot of detail of 9 years old. But I remember my after-death experience in great detail.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Most people want to know what happened. I won't spend a lot of time on that. It was a martial arts accident. I got clobbered in the head really hard, and it caused me to go into convulsions, and my tongue buckled back into my airway, and I couldn't breathe. So I died. And I was not conscious for that part of it. I lost consciousness and went face down on the concrete. So I took 2 hard blows to the head. And so I lost consciousness. Now, I say I lost consciousness, but there was no break in my awareness. It wasn't like going to sleep and waking up. It was, I was here and then I was not. And as I tell my story, it's going to sound like a progressive series of events, and it's going to sound like I'm talking about places and things. But when we leave our bodies, there's no space. There's no up, down, sideways, back and forth. None of that exists anymore, and there's no time either. There's no past or future. And I have a couple of phrases. I've had a long time to think about how to explain what it felt like, and what it feels like to be in a position of no time, no past or future is. It's a perpetual unfolding of now. And I think most people have had that experience in small ways. We've all experienced that. Maybe in dance or a brilliant musical performance, or even probably a good example would be like a really intense orgasm where you lose all sense of who you are, where you are, you're now. You're in the present moment only. So it was like that, but on steroids, and it was beautiful. a perpetual unfolding of now. And here's how it felt. It felt like I was still Raymond, but it was like somebody added ing to the end of my name. I was no longer Raymond the noun, the person, place, or thing. I had become Raymond the verb. I was Raymonding. So that's what it felt like. And to be in a perpetual state of perpetual unfolding of now is an absolutely liberating feeling. Powerful feeling. And I'll describe what it feels like to not have a body, because I didn't have a body either. I was a floating sphere of awareness. That's the best I can do to describe it. But, you know, time and space are built right into our language. And so when I describe this stuff, it's going to sound like I'm talking about a progressive series of events. And it's going to sound like I'm talking about stuff, but I'm not. It's just the limitations of our language. So when I left my body, I didn't know where I was, what was happening. I didn't remember the accident. I was in the just present moment now. There was no place or stuff. I was in a what I can only call a void, and there was no color, there was no light, there was no dark, there was no gravity, no sensations. It was nothing. And it was, I was really disoriented. I didn't know what was happening. And I still could reason. I still had the powers of, I was trying to figure out what was going on. And it frightened me. I became more and more disoriented and more scared. Because there was nothing I could grab onto to know who I am, where I am, what was happening. There was just, excuse me, nothing there. And the fear started ramping up and amplifying, and I got more and more scared. And it started getting out of control. I really kind of lost it. And I remember having this distinct thought. I remember I could still reason and think. It wasn't in words, though. I don't know how to describe that. But I remember thinking, I've lost my mind. I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. That's the explanation for what's happening. And somehow that brought me a little bit of peace. And then my next thought was, well, if I'm going crazy, there's nothing I can do about it. And I let go. I released. And when I released, all that confusion stopped. Just stopped. And then the pleasurable sensations began. And it was replaced. It started simple, like contentment and peace, and then that started ramping up and compounding and getting more and more intense. And I'm a perpetual unfolding of now, and I'm a floating sphere of awareness, and it ramped up and up and up until I was in pure, utter bliss. Absolutely beautiful experience. And maybe some of the viewers have heard stories of a tunnel, traveling through a tunnel. That didn't happen to me. Maybe some of the viewers have heard of like floating above your body and seeing the body, and that didn't happen to me. But I did become aware of a point of white light, intense, brilliant, gajillion times brighter than the sun, a little point of white light. and it was absolutely beautiful. It was alive. It was like breathing, and somehow I knew I had to go there. I don't know how I knew that, but I knew I had to go there. And remember, I didn't know that I had died. I didn't remember the accident, and I still was trying to figure out what was happening. But I knew I had to go toward the light, and as I approached the light, it got bigger and more intense and more beautiful and more loving, and it sucked me in and absorbed me. And I became the light, and the light became me. I was the white light. And a lot of experiencers talk about love, about this being a place of love. And I've tried to think of adjectives to describe the intensity of this love, unconditional, pure, powerful. The only one that I can think of that works is infinite. It was infinite. It helps me to close my eyes sometimes, so forgive me, but I can go right there. It was infinite love. If you can imagine your baby that you loved, imagine like the most intense feeling of love you've ever had, or your mother or your dog, whatever it is. Imagine that, infinite, no end. So powerful and so absorbing. Wave after wave after wave of cleansing white love washing over me. And I was the light. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And there's a lot of detail that I'm going to have to leave out because it would just take too long. But I'll give you some highlights. All of us have lost loved ones. Most of us have lost pets. I was 9 years old. And my dog, Skippy, was there. My dog was there. And again, remember, I didn't know I was dead. And now he didn't have fur and legs and stuff, but it was Skippy. He was also a floating sphere of awareness. And he absorbed him. We absorbed each other, and we were communicating. There was communication going on, but it was perfect communication. It was like telepathic, in human communication, there's this thing that happens all the time. I know you know about this, like where you'll say something and I will hear something completely different based on my filters, right? So human communication is flawed, but that communication there was perfect. And Skippy and I were talking to each other. It was, I love you. Oh, Skippy, I love you. Where are we? What happened? How did we get? It was kind of going on and on like that. And so here's the headline: your loved ones, your pets, they're there. They're still there, and you'll see them again. Next highlight. I'm a professional artist and musician, and I'm working on a book now, a series of paintings. So it's going to be a written account, but it's also going to be a series of 21 paintings, so that you can get a visual feel of what was going on. And you'll see some of these on this video later. I'll make sure that you get a copy of some of these paintings. And I found myself standing in front of these golden columns. And now remember, there's no stuff there. So it wasn't like, it was, the best I could do is say maybe it was made out of light or something. These columns, it was like Jack and the Beanstalk, just rising up. And they were stacked in such a way that it felt like it was an entrance to something. But I didn't go down there, and I didn't enter it, so I don't know what it was. I couldn't tell you what it was. Next headline. I was greeted by a being of some sort, a spirit of some sort, a floating sphere of awareness. He knew me. By the way, it was a masculine presence. And he knew me. I couldn't tell you what this thing was. It could have been an angel, or it didn't look like anything. It didn't have a body, but it was an intelligent being like me. And he knew me, and he called me by name. He said, "Raymond, come here. I want to show you some things." Right? And then, so he absorbed me, and I absorbed him. We became one, and we fell in love. The love that I felt for Skippy, it was just like that, but like on steroids or something. And there was this, what I can only call a download, where it was like billions of questions were answered in just a moment. Just all of creation opened up and shimmered, and I understood. And the odd thing about it was that it wasn't like I'd learned it. It wasn't like he taught me that I already knew it. It was more like remembering, more like that. I already knew all the answers to all these billions of questions. It was just a matter of going, oh yeah, sure, right. And I understand how everything, how the universe, how the multiverse works. Everything made perfect sense. And next headline was, he then showed me how absolutely critical my purpose was in creation. Creation, by the way, I'm talking about me, but really I'm talking about you, the viewer, because this is about you. There is no way that the universe, that creation could possibly unfold without you fulfilling your purpose. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. What's my purpose? Why am I here? Sometimes it seems kind of pointless. Like, I go to my stupid job and I got my stupid boss, and I go home and I watch TV, and there's got to be something more, right? And I've heard lots of answers to that about purpose. I've heard minister after guru, after priest, after pastor, after teacher make the claim that our purpose here is to learn and grow and learn lessons and move to the next level. And then so that each time we do this, if there's such thing as reincarnation, I can't answer that. I can't answer that question. But to progress to the next level of spiritual awareness until we achieve spiritual perfection or something. But I was told what my purpose was and what your purpose is, and it had nothing to do with learning or growing or moving to the next level. It kind of, on the surface, it sounds like it makes sense, right? Because obviously, as human beings, we grow, we mature, we learn lessons, and we, hopefully, and we get wiser as we get older. But so that kind of fits that idea. But I was told very clearly what our purpose is, and your purpose is to love. It's that simple. Hard to pull off cleanly, but you are here to love. And I'm not just talking about the warm fuzzies. Most people, when you say the word love, they think warm fuzzies. Love is a far more multi-dimensional, complex thing than just the warm fuzzies. There, it's very obvious. Everything is made out of love. Made out of it. Like, this is love. This is an expression of God's love. And if you don't like the word God, use whatever word you want. But, there's the big questions in life that we all have. I can tell you one thing. One of the big questions, I think is probably one of the oldest questions, is, okay, if God is a good, loving God, then how is it possible that he could allow the evil and the horror that obviously exists? How is that possible if he really does, if God is pure love? And so I think that religions had to invent an anti-God to explain that. Oh, that's not God, that's the devil doing that stuff, right? Well, that means God made the devil too. So, it doesn't add up. But I can tell you one thing for sure. There was no judgment. There was no atonement. There was nothing that I had ever done that was completely forgiven. And forgiven in that context meant it was gone. It did not exist. The stupid little boneheaded things I've done in my life that have been, well, let's just say less than wonderful. I didn't have to atone for that. God wasn't holding me accountable for that. God was loving me right through it. And it was total and complete forgiveness. So I know other experiencers have described hellish experiences, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know what that's about, but I can tell you that in my experience there was nothing of the sort, nothing resembling hell. Although the first part of my experience where I was in the void and I was getting confused and scared and ramping up and getting very frightened, if I had been revived at that point, I would have called that a hellish experience. It was that scary. Maybe that's part of the explanation for it. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. Again, I'm not a guru. Something weird happened to me. That's all. And I guess the last part was this being who absorbed me, and I had this download, said, now I want to introduce you to my creator, our creator. God, face to face. God didn't have a face, by the way. Remember, there's no stuff there. But he wasn't the guy with the big white beard and the lightning bolts, let me put it that way. And I'll tell you what God looked like, kind of. I've never been able to paint this. I've been trying, and I just can't get it. Not yet anyway. So pretend you are the Hubble Space Telescope. And so this is surrounding you on all levels, okay? Everywhere. And when you look at a photograph of a galaxy is made up of little points of light, stars, right? Little points of light. Jillions of them, right? And in this case, it was infinite. It went on forever. Little points of light. And I was one of those points of light. And we were all connected. And each one of those points of light was every tsetse fly, every snail, every human being, every rock who had ever lived. And that's right, rocks are alive. I can't explain that. But rocks are also made out of love. Everything is made out of love. So it was like every being who had ever lived was there. And we were all connected. We were all one thing. And now we were separate. I was still Raymond, me. But I was also we collectively together were God. And I had this feeling of, I have all the potential and power of God. I wasn't God, but somehow through the connection with all the other points of light, I was God. So I wasn't God, but I was God. And it was like this one big thought, one big floating sphere of awareness. And we were singing, and I'll never forget this. This was so beautiful. It was worship. That's the best word I can describe it. And it was about love. And it makes music as we understand it, it seemed like a cheap imitation. I could taste it and touch it and swallow it and digest it. And it took on whole other dimensions. And we were singing, I love you. We love you. We were worshiping one another with pure infinite love. And it was the most beautiful thing. And I know a lot of people have a fear of death. I have zero fear of death. Matter of fact, I want to go back. I can't wait. I'm in no hurry. I'm here to dance. I'm here to play this out as long as I can. But one thing I can tell you is that suicide won't work. If you're thinking about that, you can just scratch that one off the list, because it's not going to do what you think it's going to do. And I'm not exactly sure what that means. Again, I'm no guru, but I know that was one of the things that I was shown, is that no, you're not going. There's no short way around. You're not going to die until you fulfill your purpose. So we told me that when I say we told me, that it's not my time and I had to go back. And I threw a spiritual temper tantrum. And I said, I'm not going back. I didn't even know what back was, right? I didn't know I died. And I said, no, I'm not going back. Got this all wrong. And then once again, I was told, it's not your time. You have to go back. But you can come back anytime you want, once you fulfilled your purpose. And then I was sent back to my body.
Raymond, I'd like to thank you so much for relating your experience. And I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
Can we do a part 2 to this? I can ask you some questions about your experience?
Sure. There's a whole lot of after effect things that should probably be spoken about. But yeah, go ahead, yeah. Ask away.
Okay. Then stay tuned for part 2.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Raymond, you just talked to us about the near-death experience you had when you were 9 years old, and you said that you couldn't really remember much from when you were 9, but you remember this near-death experience rather vividly. As you related it to us just a moment ago, were you reliving it?
As I was relating it to you, yes. That's why I close my eyes a lot. I can go right back there when I close my eyes. So yes, in some ways, I was reliving it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So when you came back to your body, what was that like? When you sort of exited the near-death experience and returned to your body, what was that like?
It was not pleasant. It was, matter of fact, gross is probably a good word would be gross. It was like going from this absolute freedom to getting like stuffed into my body. It was like putting on an old crusty pair of socks or something, and I was in terrible pain, and so it was very, very uncomfortable.
What's the first thing you remember?
The first thing I remember that I had had an accident, and that was the cause of what was going on. Up to this point, during the experience, I didn't remember that at all. So the first thing I remember was the fact that I had an accident.
Were you in the hospital at this time?
No, I was. The paramedics were circled around. My head was packed in ice. I was on the Biography Channel show, and in order to be on that show, you actually have to document the fact that this happened. You have to have witnesses, and so my mother happened to be the director of nursing at the hospital that I went to. So she had the records, and we went through and near as we could tell, made a timeline, and I was out for 12 minutes, no heartbeat, no breathing for 12 minutes, which, as you know, can cause permanent brain damage, which would explain a lot in my life, actually. So, yeah.
Who was the first person you talked to about this?
Yeah. I went to the hospital. Of course, they did all their tests and all that. And then my mom came in, and I told my mom about it. And I was a very devout Catholic at the time. At the time, I thought I was going to be a priest. And my mom, being a good Catholic mom, I told her about it, and she said, "Well, oh honey, but yeah, you were very sick. You took a hard blow to the head, and the brain can do some funny things when under those conditions." And I said, "Mom, no, Mom, that was real. It really happened." And she was very concerned. She said, oh no, my baby's, been, no, what's happened to me. Anyways, but she reassured me. She said, "Look, whatever it takes, we'll work through this. I'll set up a meeting with the parish priest, Father Gallagher, and we'll work through this." And so it reassured me, and that was the plan.
Right. Before you saw the priest, did you have any thoughts about how your experience may have been at variance with what the church was telling you?
Yeah, I was in deep conflict.
Tell us about it.
Well, I was being taught, and coached, and believed, and was, remember, I was going to be a priest. And I was being told some things that were in direct conflict with what was shown to me when I died, like the idea of going to hell and suffering for all eternity, and oh, by the way, I love you. That didn't fit. A lot of the things just simply didn't fit, and it was and it caused a great deal of torment. I didn't know something was wrong. It didn't add up, and so I was depending on my mentor, Father Gallagher, to help me.
Yeah. So your intention was to be a priest. You had this experience, and what did the priest have to say about this?
Well, remember, this is 1966, and it was not, the near-death experience wasn't part of our popular culture. It wasn't part of the national debate or conversation or whatever it was. And so, Father Gallagher used his best training and his best guess, and his coaching to me was that since I couldn't say that I had seen Jesus, I couldn't say that Jesus was there, that it had probably been a trick of Satan, that Satan had probably possessed me, had gotten into my soul, and and boy, talk about scaring somebody. And I thought I had been possessed at that point. And um, um, I forgot what I was going to say, but I answered your question.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared.
Yeah. So, did the teachings of Jesus jive with what you experienced on the other side?
Yeah, most of it, yeah. If you really look at the teaching of Jesus, his ministry was about love.
Mm-hmm.
Basically about love.
Mm-hmm.
So that part wasn't so much a conflict. The part was, as the Catholic religion teaches, the big picture is that God created the angels, and then there was a rebellion, sort of a mutiny, and half the angels went with Satan, and I don't know what the proportion was, and the other half stayed with God. So they had this war going on, and God created people. And the war that was going on was about taking people's souls. You know, whoever got the most souls won. Right? You know, and which sounds so silly to me now, but I mean, this is what I was being taught. This is what I believed, and you know, I go there and I'm said to Father Gallagher, but wait a minute. This was pure love, pure love. How could Satan be pure love? And he said, Satan's that good. That's how good he is. And then that really scared me, because I don't want to be possessed by the devil.
Yeah.
You know?
So how did the advice of a priest, which you wanted to be, how did this advice from an institution affect the rest of your life?
Oh, yeah. Well, right away, after I got out of the hospital, I met with Father Gallagher. I started having some of the intuitive things you hear about people. Some of the psychic things started happening. And I remember the very first one, I'll tell you about it. I was in the kitchen doing dishes, and my father was sitting at the table calling his friend on the phone, Bill. And I could only hear one side of the conversation. He says, "Hi, is Bill there?" And very clearly in my head, I heard, "No, he went hunting in Kern County." Now, I don't even know, I was 9 years, I didn't even know what a county was, let alone Kern County. And then the next thing my dad said was, "Bill's a hunter? I didn't know he had a cabin in Kern County." And then I knew I was possessed. And it frightened me so badly that I psychologically packaged it up, the whole thing, and I put it away, I crammed it. And I didn't process it. I just crammed it. And so it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, the church was an impediment to your authentic spiritual development.
Yes, I'd say that's a pretty good explanation, yes.
Yeah, in your talk at South Bay IANS, you said something that I thought was really kind of intriguing and fun. You said that we are manifesting God wanting to play. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. I think this relates to that question of if God is perfect, infinite love, and if the love experience when we leave our bodies is so perfect, and it was, why do we have to come here to love? It's already perfect there. And the answer to that was in part of the download, and the way I kind of explain this is, when I go to the movies or to a play, I don't want to know what's going to come up. I want to be surprised, you know. Matter of fact, I want to be scared. That's part of the thing. And see, while when we leave our bodies, we are manifesting pure, infinite love, but it was intangible. It was. It didn't have any skin on. It was as if God wants to be surprised. And so that's why, so he created you, and he loves you so much. He gave you free will, and he said, Raymond, go play. Whatever that looks like to you, go play. And sometimes that play it's not real pretty, you know. I mean, and my mind rebels at it the same as everybody else's does. I try, to think of some of the horrors in life as actually being part of the creation of God's creation, but it obviously is, because God created everything.
Mm-hmm. Raymond, you said that you were given a purpose in your near-death experience, and that
Mm-hmm.
was to love, but you also said that you felt alienated and alone because of your near-death experience. Was there anything you could have experienced in life that could have helped you integrate this experience so that you would not have felt alienated and alone?
Yeah. I think that a lot of people think that having an experience like this is a magical blessing, and I suppose in a lot of ways it is, but it's not. It's also a huge burden, and any experiencer you talk to will tell you that, because and especially at that time, it wasn't part of the national conversation, and I learned very early on not to speak about it, and I couldn't talk about this. It was huge, and I couldn't talk about it, and I needed to. And so I had packaged it up and put it away, and I continued on with my Christian development. I decided not to become a priest, but I became a fundamentalist Christian, and then I think somewhere in my early 20s, I read a magazine article about a near-death experience that was remarkably similar to mine. And I remember it just kind of gushing out, like this thing that I had crammed, and really didn't want to talk about it. It was too scary. It came gushing out, and yet it was still decades before I never really processed it. And there's a big difference between, after it came gushing out, I could have told you the story, but I didn't process it, and that's a different thing. I don't know what that means. I'm not a psychologist, but I know that I needed to work through, and I needed to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no format for doing that, and I didn't know anything about IANs. But I know I needed to talk about this, so I started putting ads in newspapers saying, anybody want to talk about anybody else? And I didn't get any response. And then eventually I did find IANs, and that's where I got.
Yeah. Raymond, how does it feel to talk to a group of people about an experience that is so profound? I mean, you seem like a regular guy. How does it feel to talk about an experience that has so much depth and that can potentially be so helpful to so many people? How does that feel to talk about this experience?
In a lot of ways, extremely frustrating, because we're limited by language, and when we leave our bodies, language just doesn't cut it. So in some ways, it's very frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
In other ways, I think people inevitably come up to me at the end, and they'll just thank me. It's a lot of time in tears, thanking me. But what they don't understand is what they're doing for me is far bigger. Um, by allowing me to talk about it is purging all of that guilt and shame that I carried for decades. So actually, that's what it feels like to me. It's a cleansing experience for me.
Mm-hmm. One question I have, a key question in science right now is, how is it possible to be even more conscious when you are in a state of unconsciousness? There's some feeling now that maybe science has made a mistake. Maybe the brain does not produce consciousness. What do you have to say about this?
I don't know. There's a deep topic. Yeah.
You've experienced this, so...
Yeah, now isn't that odd that there can be consciousness without the brain? The brain is not...
I know you're not a scientist, so feel free to
a little. I know enough about it. So the brain doesn't produce consciousness. Consciousness produces the brain. Basically, is how I feel about it. Consciousness produces the brain, and because I did not have a brain at the time. As a matter of fact, I met an anesthesiologist who was talking about this very subject, saying, when I worked on this heart patient, we have to cool this body down to, very, very cold. Basically, that person is by every definition medically dead. No brain activity, no heartbeat, no nothing. The only thing keeping this person alive is machines for 4 hours. And then, boom, we can turn them back on and their consciousness is back. That says something right there about, is the brain the source of consciousness, or is consciousness the source of the brain? I think it's pretty obvious.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What is your relationship with organized religion now?
I don't have any relationship with organized religion. That's probably one of the things I need to get over. Mm-hmm. A lot of resentment there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably some people watching this program are going to say, if it doesn't jive with what the Bible says, then it must be of the devil, which is essentially what your parish priest says. And yet you experienced a transformation that many Christians don't. Mm. So how would you address, what would you have to say about Christians who have not had a mystical experience, who are down on people who have had this liberating experience and whose lives have changed?
First, I would caution most people to not make the mistake that all Christians are the condemning sort. Many Christians are open-minded and realize that they don't know everything and are genuinely interested and want to know more about it. So that's a mistake. We can't lump people together. Mm-hmm. Remember that during this decades-long period where I had not processed this, I was still a fundamentalist Christian, but I was living an inauthentic life. It was a process of dismantling this programming that I had programmed myself. And while dismantling it, replacing it with the things that I had learned and had come to me through my near-death experience. So I can't remember what your original question was, but that's what the process was of integrating and processing the experience itself was also a process of dismantling this programming that I...
So in order to be true to yourself, to what you really knew was true, you had to you had to dismantle your conditioning.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Many people watching this, as you said, have lost loved ones, so they have a fear of death. Often when people have lost loved ones, there's a feeling of alienation and coldness and silence, in which maybe they want to get a message from the loved one, or they want to be reassured that they're okay. You've run into people like this. What do you have to say to people who are undergoing the grief from having lost a loved one?
Oh gosh, that is what a great question. That is something that's really important to me. For one thing, I want to reassure them that the person that they've lost is alive and well, and can't imagine why they would be grieving for them. Now here's something else that's, even though I've been through after-death experience, I still grieve when I lose a loved one. Maybe in a little different way. I'm happy for that person, but I still go through the same grief process, and I know what it's like to grieve hard. And so the danger is to minimize it, and to while trying to reassure that person that their loved one is alive and well. And it's like walking a tightrope, to not like say, oh well, the grief doesn't exist, it's just an illusion, and don't worry about it. No, the grief is very real.
Mm-hmm.
So basically I try to keep it very, very, very quick, and allow them to ask me more questions if they want. I just say, have you ever heard of a near-death experience? I had that happen to me once, and I can assure you that your loved one is indeed alive and well, and can't imagine why you're grieving for them. And I'll leave it right there. And if they want to ask more questions, then we'll take it from there.
Okay, Raymond, your talk's been really inspiring, and I'm wondering if there's one question that along your lecture tour you would have liked someone to ask. Is there a question that you have not yet been asked that you would like someone to ask you?
Gosh, let me think about that for a minute, because I'm sure. Yeah.
Give me a question.
How do you know that what happened to you wasn't just a hallucination, a lack of blood to the brain, lack of oxygen, and that you didn't just hallucinate the whole thing?
Answer it.
I would have to be ignorant to not admit that is a distinct possibility. You'll never convince me that's what happened, but it's a distinct possibility. But the real answer to the question would be, what do you mean just a lack of oxygen to the brain? As if that's something that's trivial or something. We have a brain. I mean, we have a brain that uses oxygen for fuel. That's no less real than anything, no less magical than anything else. It's all one big magical experience, and no part of it is any less magical than any other part. Even a hallucination, so what? So what? It's an incredible thing that we have bodies that can hallucinate. I don't know if I answered that well, but that's how I'd answer it.
Yeah. But in any event, this experience transformed your life in a way that you could not have imagined if you had not had it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good observation. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think, you know, if this hadn't happened to me, I don't even know if I'd be able to make heads or tails out of the world. And sometimes I think about that. How do they get through the world without knowing some of the stuff I know? Mm-hmm. Obviously they do, and they thrive, and it's not like I'm a higher being or have any special knowledge, but I just think about myself personally, and I think I would have no clue.
Yeah. Okay, Raymond, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.